items of today. The main items of today is the reporting tool, sanctions, and the protection of complainants. I therefore take the opportunity this afternoon to welcome the moderator, our main moderator today, Professor Catherine Kiprop, who is Associate Professor, Department of Educational Management and Policy Studies, University of Moi. She's also a Director of Institute for Gender Equity Research and Development in the same Moi University. So, Professor, welcome very much. Lead us in today's session. Thank you. Once again, thank you all participants. You are welcome. Let's have an interactive session this afternoon. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mbete, for that introduction and also the opportunity to moderate this session. I think I just want to take this opportunity to welcome all the participants into this very incisive and very insightful discussion on matters sexual harassment in our workspaces. So as you have been told, we are going to look at the reporting tool, the sanctions, and protection of the complainants. And to take us through this is Mr. Eric M. Kelly, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, having over 8 years of legal practice experience. He is also a member and vice chair of the Gender Committee and also a member of the Child Law Practitioners Committee. He is also a trained arbitrator as well as a trained mediator. So I want to welcome Mr. Eric Kelly to take us through this session. Welcome.
All right, thank you so much for that. I do appreciate this opportunity to be able to speak to all of you, and I hope everybody can be able to hear me. Can you all be able to hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Yes, as my name has been stated, my name is Eric Kelly. I'm an advocate. So I'll take you through this session. What I will do, I will share my screen from my end. There's a slides that I would like to share with you so that we can all be on the same page. Give me a moment. All right. So as you have heard before, I believe my colleague divulged into what is sexual harassment in the workplace. I will dive deeper into what it entails, and as per the topics of what I'm supposed to discuss, the first one will have been the reporting tools. The other one will have been sanctions. The last one will have been the protection of complainants on sexual harassment. Now, in terms of reporting tools, I had to try and look for a definition that can be able to make it easy to understand what it is that we deem as a reporting tool. I will read out loud what is there, then I can go down and explain what is comprised in the same. Now, in line with the definition that I was able to get or to be able to acquire, a reporting tool is a tool or a mechanism that aids or assists in the providing of reports, decision-making, and intelligence capabilities on a matter of concern or requiring attention or action to be taken. Other people can say it's an avenue to report a matter that has arisen in regards to sexual harassment. Basically, it is the thing that assists in making a report based on an action that has taken place. The first one, which I've written, is a toll-free number. Recently within the country, There's been numbers that have been given, especially when we are dealing with the COVID-19 situation, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Now, the basis of which is I want to report something has happened. In terms of sexual harassment, especially in the workplace, we need things that can be able to facilitate and make it easy for us to communicate about the issue that is at hand, a threat that has happened, an action that has been taken, or something that has been shared that one may deem as being a sexual harassment. Now, most of the times I've seen that organizations give out a phone number in which a complainant may raise a concern, an issue, or something that may have come up. And as such, they usually make it be that you do not have to pay for such a service. Some may require you to pay a minimal amount of money. Secondly, we have something we deem as the sexual harassment desk. Now, for us in our profession, we have what we call a gender desk. The purpose of this is to ensure that an individual can present themselves to a specific area. It may be like an office or within a specific area of the building. And in such a situation, you are able to come and engage with an individual and state what it is that you have gone through and what it is that you may have seen, or it could be something that you're at that very instant have just experienced, and as such raising your claim or your report in line with, this is what has been done to me by the alleged perpetrator or by an individual or a group of individuals. Now, this is taken into consideration that the hospital is a very big space. So anything can happen anywhere. As such desks are usually located mostly where we have the administration block of an organization. The reason for that is to make it be in a secure place, but still a place that is private. And the engagements that are there are not something that are going to go beyond the four walls of the room we shall enter. Thirdly, we have questionnaires. There have been situations whereby it becomes difficult for somebody to approach a sexual harassment desk or a gender desk, as we may call it. And questionnaires are passed around in the different departments or sections of an organization. Now, the reason for this is to create how is the word spelled? Anonymity, whereby whatever is written on the pieces of paper or on the questionnaires can only be read by the people who are gathering that information. Now, the purpose of it is to understand, is anybody experiencing anything that is bringing them discomfort, is creating an issue in them conducting their work, is interfering with their mental health, psychological health, or even their physical health, or even their mental well-being and psychological well-being. Now, we also have, I don't know if these are still being used, but I've seen some of them being, especially in our court areas, we have the reporting of the complaint box. And mostly they're usually the ones which are situated where we have the reception areas. Because I've seen, even in hospitals, even in the court areas, they're usually in random places for purposes of ensuring somebody can drop in a complaint, a report, or a message of saying, thank you for service, well done. I'll move into the next slide, where we're discussing about sanctions. I'll try and define it as per how I've been able to get to understand it and to make it easy to be understood. Now, as per the slide that I have, a sanction is a form of a punishment or a prohibitory measure that is used to deter someone from committing any future or intended perpetration of sexual misconduct or harassment. There are various kinds of sanctions that can be put in place based on the kind of action or act that a person has engaged in. One could be the suspension of one from work pegged on the determination of actions done at the workplace. What do I mean by that? Most organizations within the country, they have the tendency of when a dispute or a concern arises, the human resource department or the disciplinary department of that organization gets to listen to the parties who are involved. Now, in a sexual harassment situation, it will be the perpetrator and the victims, or the perpetrators and the victims. Now, based on the hearing of both sides by the board or by the sitting that is determining whether an act of misconduct of some nature has been done, then that person can be suspended from their workplace, and imposition or specific measures can also be put in place to deter them from interacting with their victim until further notice. That's number one. Number two, there have been instances where we have restraining orders which are obtained from court. And the reason why we are raising the issue about restraining orders is because there are certain acts that have violated the dignity, the physical well-being of an individual or a group of individuals to the extent of causing threat and grievous harm to an individual. Thirdly, we have imprisonment, which means that either somebody has engaged in an act that has gone beyond the normal scope of, how do I say it? The normal, it's not basically the normal scope, but has gone beyond a specific level that has either threatened harm, caused death, has caused so much fear, and so forth and so on. Now, this is not to mean that we are looking down on the other offenses. Anything that is a sexual offense, pegged on the gravity of its nature, is liable for somebody to be put in jail. This is in relation to the Sexual Offences Act. I think section 6.2 relates to the same. Fourthly, we may have hefty fines being imposed. Maybe somebody sent you a nude, maybe somebody sent you a link to a pornographic site, maybe somebody sent you an image that you're not expecting, maybe somebody even sent a message that was not colorful in the right way and directed to the wrong person. Now, fifthly, we can have confiscation of electronic devices. These usually are maybe tablets, phones, computers, laptops, or in other instances, in offices, we have seen a situation whereby we are using work equipment, like we have the computers, but then it has become a common practice whereby in such organizations, an organization may limit what can be accessed or shared in line with the office equipment. If you're using a computer or a laptop, the same is controlled in such a way that you are unable to go to a specific site or share something without the authority of the administrator of that department. That can also be able to assist in deterring and reducing having sexual harassment being propagated. We also have organizations. Why did you bring about organizations? Organizations would be that in terms of if you are not comfortable with the way your organization systems, for example, in a hospital, and you find that if you go to this board or if you go to this city, you do not expect fairness, or you're in such a situation that you do not trust the system to be at the best at giving you what you deserve in terms of fairness based on the harassment, there is a list of some of the organizations that people have gone to, because there, as you can note, there's some, like I've written this COVA, which relates to coalition violence against women. It's an organization that relates to women. Now, why did we speak about violence? Because there are times that individuals, when they're sexually harassed, get also to be violently assaulted. Hence the reason why we have organizations which combine both violence and sexual harassment as one. We have GVRC, Gender Violence Recovery Center. We have FIDA Kenya. We have UNHCR. Now, these are some of the organizations that one can go to and seek redress in line with the acts of individuals and what it is that they have done. It could be a group, it could be a specific individual or a group of persons. Now, there was the issue that was also raised about the protection of complainants on sexual harassment. To simplify it, a complainant is the person who raises the claim that a perpetrator has done towards them or to them. Now, in line with that, I tried to explain what protection means. Protection means the action of protecting or the state of being protected from something or an act of shielding one from harm. How do you protect somebody who is a victim coming to you? An example is like when a patient comes to see a doctor, they will be confined in a space or they will enter into a room that is private. So, first point that we will usually raise is having anonymous submission of a complaint or a report. Why is that important? So as to make sure that the privacy of that individual or group of persons is protected and that they feel comfortable enough to know that whatever it is that I am saying before this person who has the responsibility of getting this complaint or report is not going to be shared outside of the room that I'm dealing with. Now, there's something that I've written called the inclusion of surveillance equipment in the workplace. Studies have shown that when we include surveillance equipment like cameras, motion sensors in the workplace, because even in banks, the same is done, both in the vaults where people are working and outside. It helps in making somebody become conscious that they are being watched. Yes, the Constitution talks about the right to privacy. That is okay. But for the protection of the bigger mass, inclusion of such measures as at times has proved useful in deterring people in conducting themselves in a way that is not acceptable individually or even in a societal way. Now, thirdly, we have trainings of sexual harassment, protection from perpetrators known or unknown. Now, an example of that is like what we're doing. And why did we say known or unknown? In the country, we do have registers of sexual offenders. They are usually known. They are from all walks of life and from the different professions. Why will we do a training on the same? Now, the training is best to help someone know, one, how do I conduct myself if I find myself being sexually harassed? I am assuming that from what my previous colleague had stated, she had pointed out what sexual harassment is. It can come in various forms. And based on that, one needs to know if, for example, if I receive a message on the most common way of communication, WhatsApp, you may find that people share links that are not, they may have adult content in an X-rated manner. And that, it can become something that violates your dignity and how you feel in that situation. Now, I will also go to, in a minute, termination from work. Why is this included as part of the protection for a victim of sexual harassment? There are times where it reaches that the person that you are working with has become, is like a serial offender. They have been doing the same thing over and over. They may have been suspended continuously, but then their actions are corroding the morality of the organization, making it be not a safe space for people to work. Because most of the times it is expected that if I am in a workspace, I have my workspace respected and that I am feeling safe while I'm working in it. There's also the issue about sensitization and sexual harassment, whereby information can be shared. If the organization has official emails or official newsletters, information based on sexual harassment and what it composes and the consequences and the actions that one can take can be shared for purposes of gaining information based on what is happening within organizations, not only in your field, but in other fields, what action to take, who to see, and how one can conduct themselves to better help themselves in such a situation. Lastly, there's the issue about confidential engagements or meetings. Now, why did I talk about confidential engagements or meetings? There are times that somebody may feel it is difficult to go to, as I pointed out, the sexual harassment desk or to report it to the HR. Somebody may like to have an engagement or a meeting or a talk outside of the workspace. It is important to always remember that when you become a victim of such acts, it becomes hard to speak about it. And if you're not in that person's shoe, one is unable to understand how that person is feeling because you are in a state of vulnerability. And at that stage, trust is something that is always on the edge because you always ask yourself, if I talk to this person, will they share this information with the other person or not? Or will this information be used against me? Because there are times whereby we have had somebody has reported an alleged sexual harassment claim, but the same information is used against them, more particularly in the workplace, whereby they get either demoted in work, they get either suspended in work, they either get transferred to another place, or they get continuous frustration in the workplace. So every single time that they are trying to get something done, they are not feeling comfortable in getting to move forward and feeling safe in their workspace. Now, in line with what I have raised, there were three things I was touching on. The reporting tools, which are meant to make a victim's communication of an alleged harassment or misconduct or act known from one stage to another stage. Two, there's the issue about the sanctions. What kind of actions, what tools can be used in protecting one in line of this perpetrator has done something, how do I get myself to be redeemed of this situation? Because from how I understand, when somebody is sexually harassed, the stain of what has happened to you does not go away. There are times even people require counseling to be able to move forward. Some it has taken days, weeks, others years. Now, there's also the issue I raised about the protection of complainants on sexual harassment. How do I protect this individual? It could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a colleague. How do we do it as an organization to ensure that the people who work with us feel safe? Are they protected? Or is it that every time they come to work, their safety is always being jeopardized? They cannot do anything without feeling like as if something is going to happen because so and so has been doing that to somebody else. And since his behavior is known, nothing has happened. So we usually implore upon people, even when you're drafting or you're making any policy relating to sexual harassment, it is always key to know that there are laws that are meant to protect us and protect everybody who is around us. For example, we have the Sexual Offences Act, which means if you commit a crime in a sexual nature, the law is meant to take its course of action. But then we usually say we deal it from the grassroots, before we move to higher up in the hierarchy. There is the issue about what we call the Fair Administrative Act. Its purpose is to regulate or put in check the administration of an organization. There is the Employment Act, which most times we have noted as lawyers that in the workplace, it keeps on getting violated. And people have realized since we cannot enforce such and such, we can do things as per the will of whatever it is that we want. We control the narrative in the story of how an individual or somebody who is working with us can be. There is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. There are international conventions. There is international law. There is the UN Convention of the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Something to take to notice is sexual harassment is not only confined to women. It happens to everybody, both men and women. In the legal profession, it has happened to both male advocates, female advocates, clerks. Nobody is safe from it, inclusive of myself, because I've had such an experience. And having been through such an experience, I have learned how it affects people, because there's always a question of why did it happen to me? How best could I have prevented it? Is there a way that in the future, these can be deterred? Is there a way that nobody else will go through the same thing that I have gone through? So we usually implore that whenever we are creating any policy or any laws or any bills that are meant to make the lives of all of us easier, it is important that we ensure that we do not discriminate against anybody, we don't look down upon anybody, and we try to our level best to ensure that we are looking at the best interest of each and every person. Because from how I understand a hospital works, a hospital has different departments for each and everything. From pharmacists, surgeons, doctors, it's dentists, everything is all included. But that does not mean that people should not be protected while dealing with this. Because when we look down on others, then the safety of those individuals will be felt jeopardized, compromised, and that they will never be able to know, how do I speak out about such an act? Because reporting such instances has been such an issue, because most people always fear, because number one, they're like, if I say this or if I report this, no action will be done. Number two, if I say this, either I'll get discriminated against, or number three, if I say something to someone, I'll be looked down upon and my work shall be frustrated. This is a very live situation that even for us as advocates has been raised. And it becomes something that needs to be taken with a lot of sensitivity and consideration of what it is that is happening in the world, what is happening within the workforce, even what is happening in the homes. And even as a big organization, as a hospital, it is the mandate of each and every single person. Say something and do something about it. Otherwise, we find that more and more people become victims, just like the way when we were having the lockdowns and the gender-based violence escalated to a higher note, because people are not used to having each other in the same home for more than 24 hours. And in light of that, I believe I have covered what was brought to my attention. I'm seeing their questions. I will try to answer them unless the moderator has something to input or anybody has a question to ask.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eric Kelly, for that very insightful and very informative presentation on this issue of sexual harassment. I must say that this is an issue that is affecting each and every person in our organizations. And sometimes we do not know how to deal with this, especially the fact that in most cases, people will not, or rather the victim is usually blamed for, for the action. And so sometimes it's very difficult to actually report. In some organizations, I know the procedure going by the different policies of every organization. The policy could have a reporting procedure. And what I know is that in some organizations, it has been, issues have been raised in as far as the process is concerned, that sometimes it's too long, and therefore people do not have that confidence to, or rather they don't feel like they want to go through that rigorous process of reporting the vice. And even sometimes, as you said, that there is a agenda desk where people are supposed to do so, to report. Yes, that could be there, but again, there are issues that have been raised in as far as the gender desk is concerned, that sometimes even the person who is being reported to has no capacity to handle these issues and many other issues. And I'm sure many of these participants who have listened today have their questions. I think we can now move on to the question and answer session. And we shall begin. I think we will read from the chat. I can see already 6 questions have been put forward. Elizabeth Bukusi says that administration blocks are a good idea as people go there for various reasons, so could reduce stigma. But that is also where the higher powers sit, and can this also be intimidating, especially for someone harassed by a highly ranked official? So I think Elizabeth is raising an issue of the location of the office, that it could also be an intimidating space since it is occupied by people who are highly ranked, and sometimes they are the ones who could also be the perpetrators of this. Maybe you could respond to that.
All right. Thank you for the question. Now, I can understand. In terms of having like the space where people are supposed to talk, I understand. Okay, yes, practically most times we usually have it in administration block, and the problem, as you have raised, it may be that whenever you enter into the room, then it becomes an issue because somebody may have seen you, somebody may have talked to you. Now, there's another option. Now, instead of it being in the administration block, I don't know how the setup of hospitals are through and through, but from my experience with the times I've visited hospitals, these rooms can also be, how do I say it? Because I've seen some spaces whereby they're located near the reception, near the main entrance. That's number one. Number two, it could be done as a separate small, how do I say it? Like a small, not a small tent. Like the way we have a container, it is placed somewhere specific, such that you are away from prying eyes. It could be in the field area, somewhere that is a bit private. A container is placed, put up like an office, such that people can be able to approach the same. Or it could be put, where else? Where else in the building can I think of? Mostly those are the 2 areas I'm thinking about. Because I understand when they are placed where the administration block is, people may feel intimidated, which at times, yes, it's true. It has happened. The reason why we usually, what do you call it, say that it should be done or put there is because it is the area where most offices are. But that does not mean it has to be permanently there. Another way that it can be done, it can become a mobile unit, like the way we have courier service. They are always on wheels. Now, in such a situation, what can happen is you can be having like, what are they called? It's like a trailer that is usually pulled from one location to another. The reason why I'm talking about that is because it will make it easier for somebody to know that, wherever I am going to enter into, nobody or a number of people are not going to see me. And even if people see me, like the way we have the VCT sentence, even if somebody sees me, I will not be compromised or intimidated by somebody else. I don't know if that has helped in answering the question and clarifying the issue.
Okay, thank you. There is also an anonymous attendee who says or asks a question that if a client confides to have been sexually harassed by family members and only wants to heal, they reported to the parents but was conned bitterly and warned about reporting it. What can you advise? I think that's a very personal kind of a question.
Yes, I can understand that. Having been or still been a peer counselor, I've had such kind of situations. So what usually happens is this: somebody may not feel comfortable enough to how do we say, to report it, and they want to move forward. Now, this is where we usually have the use of psychologists and psychiatrists to come in play. For myself, I've had to get a contact list of reliable, trusted psychologists and psychiatrists. Why is that? And also as well as counselors. The reason for that is this: you can never force somebody to report an issue unless their lives are threatened. There are people who have reached a place whereby they usually decide, I only want to move forward. So number one, if they're coming to you as a friend or they're coming to you as a professional in your field, you can try and engage with them to be a shoulder for them, apart from being a professional at your work. Number two, you can suggest and provide for them a list of psychologists, psychiatrists, or counselors who can talk to them. Because you see, it is usually stated that a problem shared is a problem half solved. Because if you talk about it, it will be able to assist you to move forward. Thirdly, you can also let that person, if they're a person who are into sportish activities, because I have learned also this helps, because the mind needs to become active and to be able to move forward. You can tell somebody, for example, I have had friends who have encouraged to come with me for walks, for runs, for discussions with group members of the group of a specific criteria, for purposes of diluting what they're going through. Now, that does not mean we are going to negate the problem that is there. Hence the reason why I stated by, number one, you're becoming a shoulder to them. Number two, you are directing an individual or a group of persons to somebody who they can talk to in confidence. Because you know, some people go through these experiences and they find it difficult to engage somebody else. So in such a situation, they can either talk to you or talk to a professional. If not, they can be talking to you and you can ask with their permission if you can include a professional who handles such situations to be able to guide them to move forward. But in situations whereby the issue is life-threatening, then that becomes something different. Because you can advise, yes, but then you must negotiate and find a way of how do I make this person understand that what is happening can also be solved with the authorities. I hope I've answered the question.
Yeah. Thank you. I think there are many more questions that are coming. I hope
That's okay. We'll answer what we can.
Able to answer all these questions. Okay. There is another question by, just a minute, Roslyn Mkabana, who asks, how do we ensure that all government agencies have sexual harassment policy in place? And also police. I think she means also same with the police. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Now that one is a tall order, because what I do know is this: government agencies, they have their own way of how they conduct themselves. However, there's an act that I talked about, the Fair Administrative Act. It puts people in check because you see, what usually happens is this. Most agencies or organizations may have their own kind of way of dealing with disputes because it usually takes the initiative coming from those in charge of the departments, plus those in need to be able to get an agency to do what is expected. Now, because when you're dealing with the government, the problem that we usually experience is this. Most times, even on the road, you usually get the experience of, if I'll say it in Kiswahili, serikali ndio kusema. I'm trying to figure out how to say it in English. My translation is gone. But that the government is beyond the law. And unless policies are enacted using conventions, international conventions, international laws, and the moving of bills, it becomes a third task to get things done when you're dealing with the government agencies. Now, there's something about, I don't know if the question is about the police or in policing. Maybe I can get a clarity on that.
I don't know whether the person who asked is in a position to ask, to clarify that. I don't know. I also thought probably she's also asking whether the police also can have the same policy. Yeah.
Oh, the police. All right. So to answer now the question, a sexual harassment policy can be instituted and used in any organization that is within the Republic of Kenya. I'll give you an example. There's we usually, like the way we have the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. This is a global document. It is not just a local document. Now, if one wants to get the policy used in the office, like the way we may have a task force or a committee that is created to be able to do the same so that it can come into effect. Hence the reason why I was talking about the issue about sensitization, because the need for something must be made aware for an organization to be able to understand we need to have this. Every organization, every agency in the country can have such a policy. The only issue usually is this. Most times you usually get resistance from the supposed powers that be. Now, why am I saying that? For us as advocates, even when we are trying to get our policy to be effected, we were facing a lot of resistance. And the reason why we were facing the resistance is because those who were in charge, some of them, did not want it to come to light that certain actions that they are doing are wrong. So it does take the movement of masses. That's why even people engage into petitions for such things to be enforced. But the best way I usually say is a group of individuals come together, they submit, this is what we want done, and the betterment of that is also put in line with what the law says. Because if you look at the Sexual Offences Act, if you look at the Fair Administration Act, if you look at the Employment Act, these are places where people are working as employer and employee. Such, it is important their protection to be taken into consideration. I hope I've been able to answer and clarify on this.
Thank you. There is also another one by Terry Maitai. She's asking what happens when one is asked for evidence or witness.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, I understand what she's trying to ask. I'm assuming I understand. I'm thinking what she may be asking, what is being asked is, what happens if I have nothing to prove or show? So it becomes he say, she say. Now, based on your credibility. Because there are situations whereby if an organization is understanding, it will ask questions to both you as a victim, as well as the perpetrator of the alleged offense or harassment. Because at times it becomes an issue. Maybe you may have, sometimes people have recordings, sometimes people have texts, sometimes people have a note that they were given that can be produced. But then, there are situations whereby you find that there are times you do not have anything. Maybe somebody touched you inappropriately and grabbed you places they're not supposed to do that. How do I say, how do I show this was done? It becomes a bit of a task, but it can be raised by you just stating to them, this is what happened to me on this day at this time. Now, proving it, that will now become an issue, because there are some people, from how I may understand, who may do such acts knowing that there are no measures or nothing is seen of them. That wherever they're in a room, there is nothing recording them, it's only them and their colleague or their worker, then it can become a bit of an issue to prove the same. But if you do have that evidence, you can either submit it yourself or anonymously for the same to be considered that this is something that is there. But then when it comes to issues of there is nothing that you can prove it for them to know that this is happening. We usually look for us like advocates, we will call it hearsay. But then if I'm a credible person in the organization, and the organization understands the woes and the pleas of people within such an institution, then it can be considered. But at times it also becomes a challenge. Hence the reason why we usually say, for example, like when it's dark, don't walk alone, walk with others. Walk where there's a well-lit street. Because some situations may go beyond the normal. It may have been a small incident or an incident that was disgusting, but then there are no traces that are there. So at times it can become quite a challenge to provide the same. But if there is any evidence, you can be able to provide it. If you have a witness, you can be able to call them. I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, thank you. Another one from Judy Machuka, who asks, are there preventive and, Yeah, she's asking, are there preventive and treatment measures in place to address the psychosocial needs of sexual offenders towards mitigating the behavior? I guess she's looking at the perpetrator as somebody with a problem who needs help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Let me go from my little knowledge of the medical profession. What I understand is this: if I know I have a problem and I'm able to accept and acknowledge that it exists, I can be helped. Now, if a perpetrator has committed an offense and he's known for doing certain acts, you see, in line with if I have an addiction, the first instance would be that I must acknowledge this a problem that I have for addiction. Now, the measures that are usually there, because I have seen in such situations that unless somebody is agreeable to the same, we usually have rehabilitation being done. Now, under our profession, sexual offenders, fortunately, under the law, they're usually taken to prison or jailed. But there have been reforms which have been coming in place whereby, though somebody has been jailed or put in prison because of an offense that he has created or he has done, there's programs which are now coming in place to rehabilitate that individual. Number two, there's instances whereby they are having, what do you call it? It's like the way we can have a probation officer, somebody who you are accountable to for purposes of reporting or talking to, stating that I am undergoing this is where I've reached, and this is what is happening. But it's still a work in progress in all professions, as well as within the country. Because most times we find that sexual offenses done by perpetrators or the offenders are at times not taken more seriously. Because for us, when you commit a sexual offense, you're imprisoned. But then now it falls short of how do we help this person become better? Unfortunately, it becomes a bit of a task. But then I'm not saying it is impossible, because it's hence the reason why we can involve, what do you call it? They're called what? There are those meetings whereby from an addict, I'm introduced to it, I meet with fellow addicts, then we're able to discuss to understand where and what is the history of the genesis of the acts and the conducts that I have. So my assumption will be some of those can be able to be used.
Thank you. Anonymous attendee is asking that if a client, after treating her, asks for my number just for a follow-up, then later starts sending me a nude snap and even a pornographic video, is this equal to sexual harassment? And
All right.
making a scenario, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yes, I'm alive to that very fact. That one I've had an experience with. Yes, I will say that that amounts to sexual harassment. This is the reason being. If at the time of giving out or sharing your phone number, it was meant to be for official businesses only, and somebody without your consent starts sending you things that are not palatable or acceptable to you, this is something that means this is a red flag. The intention was not to communicate with you officially, but now to harass you using technology. Now, one of the key things I usually tell people, especially in your profession, for example, if you want to get in touch with me, I will give you our office line. Now, the reason for that is this: to avoid people getting directly in communication with me and sending me unnecessary things, unless there is a trust that has built up. Number two, considering we are currently using smartphones, you can be able to block this person on Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook, phone calls, text messages. I do understand the aspect of being humane and saying, if I block this person, they will not be able to get in touch with me. If something is really important and serious and they need to get in touch with you, they can come to you officially and communicate with you. Because when you share things that are explicit, this
Hello? Hello? Yeah.
I am back.
Welcome back, Kelly.
All right, we can proceed.
Okay. Yeah, question from Felix Omondi. How would you maintain confidentiality of the abused client in workplace, more so, where people will keep on sharing information? Someone says, you know, Mr. So-and-so abused Madam say X in the office. So how can confidentiality be maintained?
All right. Now, so to answer that, I'll give an example of how do we call it? How us lawyers, we do it. You see, when you come to my office, I deal with different kind of clientele. People walk in, people walk out. But then it is usually said that a secret is usually best kept between two people when one is dead. Now, this is where the act of professionalism has to take place. Because yes, we as Kenyans, we have a loose set of lips. Whenever somebody says something, we have the habit of always talking about it. So my encouragement for my state will be, when we are in such a situation, in terms of in line with confidentiality, it is important that what is said to us, we keep to ourselves. And if somebody is discussing about somebody else, we avoid any engagement in such conversations. Because you see, when I become a fuel in a conversation about a particular person, that means I'm encouraging the sharing of information that was only meant for that person or meant for myself. It is usually a bit of a task, but it's usually quite important that when we are in such a situation and the information is given to you as an individual, unless it is going to the relevant authority or body, it is prudent that we maintain it to ourselves. If you're unable to, then you tell that person, kindly have that conversation with so and so. They are better placed to understand your situation and assist you in the matter. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we will always be sharing whatever comes into a place. Now, for us, we have an advocate-client confidentiality. I cannot, under oath, talk about an individual unless it's something that threatens the lives of people, it's something that is a danger to the country, then that is the only time I can speak. But whatever happens between me and the person who sits opposite me, that remains between the two of us. It takes a lot of restraint for one to be able to do such. Otherwise, most of the times it will be, if you receive information or if you hear information, you'll always be sharing it with one person, because you must understand it. As a professional, it is expected of you to have some sort of decorum and be able to maintain and keep that which is said to you to yourself. Otherwise, you will break the confidence and the confidentiality that is expected of you. I hope I have been able to answer this question.
Thank you. John Moirori Maura asks that there are a lot of sexual harassment in the disciplined forces, for example, the police service. How can one get help, considering that the same service can easily destroy evidence?
That one is a technical question.
Yeah.
Because I know, now I wish we were like in the American countries, whereby they usually wear body cameras, and they have things that record things. Because I know the problem we have in our countries is people like to play dirty. And unfortunately, having experienced what can be done in the discipline forces, it makes it be that whenever somebody is going into a particular area, they have to be self-conscious, self-aware. However, the problem with that is this: you cannot always be either having your phone recorder on or, how do I say it? Using your phone to record videos or audio. It becomes a bit of a challenge. If the situation does not require you to be in a confined room, a meeting can be done outside. But I know for the police, since we interact with them, most of the time, conversations are held inside the offices. But what I've seen being done is the doors are usually left open. Or you can go with a colleague. That one is a bit of a technical one, because I've tried to see how that one can be assisted. And the unfortunate thing is this: most times evidence gets destroyed And a lot of things will always happen. Like the boss will always tell you, close the door. Now, I don't know if one will have to keep a distance from them in terms of conversation, because also now that also jeopardizes their job. It's that one for real. That one I can say that one is one very technical question that I will have now to look into such kind of situation.
Thank you. To the participants, I know there are so many questions which are flowing in, and I can see one person asking as many as 5 to 6 questions. Kindly allow me to just give you one opportunity and give the rest. If your question has been answered, kindly, if I skip the subsequent ones, please don't feel bad, because I think we need to give everyone a chance. So I'll only deal with questions of people who have not asked a question before, and unless we will have more time remaining, then maybe we can go back. So allow me to do that. So another question from Timothy Gishwiri is asking, most sexual cases lies in family setup and are handled locally. I had a client who was molested at 7 years, and when she was 13 years, antipsychotics were started, and she's now 17 years. How do we handle her, since she constantly says she isn't psycho as claimed?
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm trying to understand the question.
Whether that is within the scope of what we are doing today.
Yeah, I'm also trying to understand the question.
Yeah.
So as to, okay, unless it can be rephrased, I'm still trying to digest to get what it is that they're specifically asking.
It sounds more of a medical kind of a question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can skip that for now, just the ones that you are able to. Marietta Boniface, what remedy do we have if a person reported sexual harassment is a setup? If a reported sexual harassment is
a setup. All right. Now, this is where the policy usually comes in place, because we have also had false allegations or false claims being made. Number one, we have had situations where somebody does a public apology. Number two, we have had, if somebody was in work, they're either suspended or they're taken into, what is that thing? They're given a warning. Number three, we have had situations, because now it depends with the gravity or the extent the allegation has taken. Because there are some which are, they usually just on the onset, just a report that, oh, somebody touched me and it's just false, and nothing has interfered with your work. Now, the people even they can be charged in a court of law for giving wrong information. Also, we can have situations whereby the board or the sitting of the hospital or that department can have a disciplinary hearing that metes out a punishment based on what it is the person has done or stated. Because at times you have had allegations being made, even in court, that are false, that he raped me, yet somebody did not do the same. And in such situations, we have had the court now, instead of charging the person who is a perpetrator, it turns the other way around. So it's a dicey place that requires wisdom to be exercised. Because one has to look at it this way. If I give false information, even as to the police, the way the police usually say, you can be charged for that. If I give false information in my workplace, number one, I can get suspended, I can get summarily dismissed, I can be terminated from work. Number three, you can have, how do I say it? Somebody can do a public apology to clarify that such and such did not happen. That is some of the things I can think about.
Okay. Harriet Waweru asks, in a situation where employee assistance program is in place, it's best to be a reporting point. In administration, questions that are asked intimidate and cast doubt on the staff who is experiencing harassment, like, how old are you? Are you married? Why is he or she focusing on you? this intimidates. I guess that is a comment.
Yes.
And raising concern that sometimes the person who reports may not be, handled in the best way. Yeah.
The best way. Yes. So now I can put a rejoinder to that. Now, in such a situation, what I will encourage any organization to do. It is always important to have a training on how to handle a victim of a sexual offense or a harassment. It is like the same way we have the gender-based violence organizations. They do have trainings. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because of what you've just specifically stated. Most times, we usually question is, mbona ilikufanyikia peke yako, mbona watu wengine? These things usually happen. But that does not inspire confidence in that person to be able to talk to you, and they will know that whatever is going to happen next will never be in my favor. So one of the things I would like to encourage in such a situation is that trainings and sensitization need to be done. That you as a person who is receiving the report, this is how you need to conduct yourself if you're dealing with a person. The same way a doctor, nurse, psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor will do. You must be able to have a listening ear that you are able to show empathy. Because if you become the judge, then you become the executioner, the victim of the act that has been done to them will not be able to speak out because they will feel that there is no fairness that is going to be there. Number three, it is important when you are receiving this information to have an open mind. That's why we encourage, number one, information needs to be passed out. That's why you need to be sensitized. Number two, one needs to be trained to be able to understand how to deal with an individual and at what level to interact with them. Number three, how you're able to engage with that person to understand them from, if I was in these shoes. So it is very important that information is shared, because you see, if you're a person who is sadistic, or you look down upon others, or a chauvinist, you will always have the tendency of putting down somebody else. Hence the reason why there's a requirement for empathy or some bit of emotional connection to rise, to be able to, for you to understand what is happening and what it is that person is going through. I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, thank you. Sylvester Kivindu asks, what can be done as policies are there but ineffective? A very interesting question.
Yes, and I know that is usually one of the biggest problems that exist. Policies can be there, laws can be there. The enforcement is usually where the problem is. Because, for example, what can be done is if we are able to, for example, if I commit a sexual offense or a sexual harassment in the workplace, number one, what I will expect is somebody can be able to report the same without any discrimination or being looked down upon and confidentially. Number two, I will expect that a fair hearing to take place and that the people who are sitting on the panel are people who have whose characters are credible. Number three, I will expect that in line of having the hearing being done, that it will not be like a revenge mission, whereby the victim who is undergoing what the perpetrator has done is let scot-free or no measures are taken. Number four, there will be the issue of enforcement. If one is found guilty, it is expected as the heads of the various departments and organizations to take action. Now, for example, if I have done something that is wrong, then it's either I'm getting fired, it's either I'm going to report to the police, it's either I'm getting suspended. And this is not only just by words, it needs to be followed by actions. Because I know there's usually a tendency of, if something is done, the higher ups will not do anything about it. Hence, it's usually very important that whenever a panel is sitting, it should not just include the people who are the heads, but also those who on the ground, such that there is fairness in the conduction of what is there. And lastly, ensuring that compliance is adhered to. Why do I bring that up? For example, every organization needs to have its own rules and regulations. This is what we expect people to do, how to behave, how to conduct themselves. Because there's the aspect of in Kenya, if we don't put our hand down, people can't do anything. So in line of this, there need to be guidelines, apart from the policies themselves, that state that this is what is expected here. And that whenever this is being done, the confidentiality of that information is taken into place, the feelings of that victim is understood, the actions of that perpetrator is taken into high consideration of the next step to be taken. Thus, it is important to know that it all starts with you. I will report it. It is expected as me as the receiver of that report to know that I have somebody's hands, somebody's lives in my hands. The same way, like for us as advocates, if I go to court, I have my client's life in my hands. If I do something wrong, there will be something that will take effect, that will either affect them positively or negatively. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, thank you. I know time is so much far gone, and we still have so many questions. I'm not sure you will be able to handle all this with the little time that is left. But I think you have actually touched on many issues, which I think some of the questions are even overlapping.
Yes.
But maybe we can just take some two more, and then I hand over the program to Joachim Mbithi. So there's one, Nancy Tandui, I think she's making a comment that administration blog is a no. I think an office dealing with counseling, and to her, she thinks employee program or ACU should be matched to help such clients or staff, that creating other small offices only creates confusion to staff. So I think she's saying that she doesn't see the need of having a different office for handling cases of sexual harassment because that will create confusion. I guess she's making that comment in reference to maybe her place of work, which I want to suspect is Kenyatta National Hospital. I don't know. Yeah. So I think that is just a comment. I don't know whether you want to react to that.
Yes, I can react to it just like, yes, I do agree to some extent. But you see what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to do is this. If we have a central place where people can go, it will assist. Because you see, if I'm going to the director's office or to the human resource office, and if I know the information that I'm passing along will not remain in the four walls, that becomes an issue. Now, I try to look at things in the way of an adult. If you are grown up and mature, you'll know that if I get some sort of information coming to this specific office, nothing will happen. Now, the reason why I was talking about a different place was because of this. There have been situations whereby somebody feels uncomfortable going to a specific room because it is next to somebody else's office who is either a director, who is either a higher up. That can create a problem. But then what I'm looking at is this. How do I create a safe environment for somebody to approach me? Now, it can also be done in another way. It can be in a same office, but there is a section that is secluded from the rest of the people of the office. So having an office within an office, then it can make sense if that is practicable enough. But it's something that needs to be weighed on. How do I make a victim comfortable enough to be able to engage me and say what it is that is disturbing them in a way that they will not feel like as if they're being suppressed, oppressed, or they're going to be discriminated against. That will be my thoughts on that issue.
Thank you. One last one.
Okay.
Somebody asks, how do you quantify the refusal of a lady if you seduce her in workplace, and how do a lady, or how does a lady the lady produce an evidence in court that you seduced her and she refused, thus leading to harassment?
Well, all right. That one now. How do I answer? How do I answer that one? There's a thing about getting harassed or refusing being seduced. If somebody says no, this is not the 90s or the 80s when you used to say no and it means yes. This is a different era. If for example, if I approach a lady and I ask, can you give me your number? And she says no, you have to respect it, because most times what we do is this. Like for me as a man, if I receive the word no, what I will do is I will deem it as a challenge. Hence the reason why I will go forth and say, this one, I need to pursue her more. If somebody has not consented to whatever it is that you are trying to tell them, let it be. Now, in line of evidence, as I said, it usually comes in different forms. Because you see, these days, everybody has technology. Something can also be from the physical properties of somebody, like from your own physical body itself. Harassment can be proved using that. You can use audio, you can use visual, you can use tangible documents. It varies. But this is a very gray area that requires one to have a lot of moral consciousness. Because most times, there are certain things that we do, we may not see them as being harassment, but there's something that somebody is not comfortable with. It may be something that we are used to happening all over and nobody does anything about it. But then when we're able to get this information to ourselves, or from the people who are supposed to pass that to us, we'll be able to know that whatever is happening is something that I should not be doing. Hence the reason I should stop. So it's a very tricky, dicey area that requires a lot of self-searching to be able to be in the right track. That is my thought on that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Eric, for that engaging session. You've really taken a lot of questions, and I know there were still very many, yes. But I know time will not allow us. But thank you so much for the very insightful and very, kind of very informative presentation. So I think my session ends here, and I want to hand over this program now to my co-moderator, Joachim Bitti. Welcome.
Thank you, Professor Catherine Kiprop from Moi University. Once again, I take the opportunity to thank our main organizer for this session, for this event, Dr. Kinuthia. I would also like to thank our able presenter, Counsel Eric Kelly from Kelly, Kamura, and Mashogu Advocates.
Welcome.
Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the participants who have been patient enough to bear with us throughout the session. And last but not the least, I welcome all the participants again on 28 July 2021 for another session on compliance of sexual harassment policy and safeguards against false complaints. Otherwise, have a blessed evening. Thank you. You can leave now.
Thank you.